Okay, we want to start off by talking about how we collaborate with NENS. And I think Michael, you wanted to start with that.
Yeah. So for the customers that we have and the customers that hopefully we'll gain soon, we are a Microsoft partner, a very strong Microsoft partner, but we have limitations as to how deep our knowledge and skills go into Office 365 and specifically SharePoint and some automation. So where we know our limitations, we've formalized a partnership with Mark and Distributed Logic, and there are two ways that we have customers engage with DLC. They can either engage directly with Mark and have a direct relationship with them, or other times it's just a pass-through where we're managing a good amount of Office 365, and there are just a few bolt-on, add-on things that we rely on Mark to help us provide. Also, as I said, if we get in over our heads from an escalation standpoint in specific areas of Office 365, we have an engagement with Mark where they'll jump in and assist.
Great. Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it. All right. So I'm not going to dwell too. First of all, let me back up one moment and make sure we let everybody know what we're going to cover here. We've already gone over the first part. We'll just leave a slide up in a moment about distributed logic. You can circle back to it. The long and the short of it is we do everything Microsoft 365. We'll then talk about what Microsoft 365 is. We'll talk about its position in the marketplace, and then we'll talk about challenges and solutions. And these are and you can see some of these high-level challenges laid out here. These are the challenges that we hear the most about from our customers. And then we'll go into some other Office 365 benefits. Okay. So this is what we do. I'll just leave it up for just a moment. Pretty much we run the gamut. So everything from Teams training, governance systems, managed services, process automation, complex collaboration solutions, etc. Okay, so what is Microsoft 365? Yeah, it's a lot of things. It's referred to as an Office productivity suite, and it really is kind of an everything platform for a lot of businesses. So it covers things like, it supports things like business process automation, business intelligence, collaboration, of course, portals, customer portals, other portals, enterprise search, content management, and a lot more. These are all the services, or most of the services that are available on Office 365, which, by the way, the official name is, as of a few months ago, is Microsoft 365. This periodic table is quite daunting, but we'll show you later that people don't use all of these. We'll show you what people tend to use. It's a much simpler viewpoint. Okay, and what's Microsoft 365's position in the marketplace? Now, it's really an everything platform, so there's different ways of looking at it. In terms of collaboration, this is a slide on total collaboration market share, and you can see that Microsoft has the largest portion of that out of any individual provider. This is actually popularity of Office productivity apps kind of across the board, and you'll see, some of the obvious ones out there like Google and Salesforce, AWS, etc. You can see Microsoft 365 is still well above it in terms of total paid users. And finally, this is Teams adoption. So Teams came out in July of 19. And it's up to 145 million users. This is Microsoft's #1 priority across the organization. It is their #1 revenue driver out of all of their products. So the Office suite is actually generates much more revenue than Windows even. Okay, so now to the meat of it. So platform challenges. These are the things we hear. We hear that the platform's intimidating. There's too many options. I don't know what to use or when to use it. In particular, there's a very specific pain point around what tool should I use for document collaboration, because you've got 3 on the platform. That can cause confusion. Where did my file system go? So you might be used to a local network drive or traditional looking file system, bunch of folders and in documents. And oftentimes people want to know where that file system went. Why can't I see a file system in Microsoft 365? And the other thing is the platform is just difficult to manage. Okay, so we're going to go over each of these, and we're going to talk about how we address these. Okay, first off, intimidating, too many options. So as we saw a moment ago, this is the periodic table of all the things that Microsoft is offering in Microsoft 365, but don't panic, because really, this is what people tend to use. And by the way, 80% of the activity we see is in Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive. So really, instead of having 30 some odd options, there's really three main areas that people focus on, and then other organizations perhaps do quite a bit with these other elements, which we'll talk a little bit more about. Okay, so in terms of here's three different technologies that allow you to collaborate on documents. So you see this Venn diagram. You've got the shared document collaboration in the center. So they all share that ability to do document collaboration. And whether you're in OneDrive or Teams or SharePoint, that operates pretty much the same. It's pretty much the same interface. But then each of them has additional kind of capabilities over on the side. Okay, we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Most of our customers cite training as the most important element in leveraging the platform properly. We don't recommend organizations just jump into the platform without any training. We find that the training is just an enormous boost. Okay, we also recommend training after a governance plan has been put in place. And we'll talk a little bit about governance plans, but in essence, a governance plan is, this is how we in our organization use the technology. Here's the policies we have. You're not allowed to share with guest users, or different policies like that. Once that's in place, then we'd like to see training happen after that. Okay, so we're going to focus down a little bit on that. Which tool should I use for document collaboration issue? This is actually probably the thing we hear more than anything is, I've got three different tools. Which one do I use? Okay, so in reality, you have four tools. People don't realize they have a fourth oftentimes. You have four tools, but here's what's interesting about the system. SharePoint is where all of the documents are stored. End of story. There's no other documents anywhere else in Microsoft 365, except some really weird stuff. But basically, all of your documents are sitting in SharePoint. So SharePoint behaves like this back-end service to all of these other tools. So every document's in SharePoint. That's a good thing. Then you have multiple user interfaces you can use to interact with those documents. SharePoint itself is not just a backend, it has a user interface. So does OneDrive, and so does Teams. Okay, so and then you also have Windows Explorer, which we'll demo in a moment. And Windows Explorer can actually let you see all your files as well. So the thing is, you really have four different interfaces in only one place where everything's stored. You use these for different purposes. So let me come to the next slide. So Teams about 80% of our customers use Teams as their primary collaboration tool, complemented by OneDrive and SharePoint. But Teams is made for team-based collaboration, so you're collaborating with other people. It's not just your own documents that you keep to yourself. And it's also a simpler experience in terms of managing the team over time, like adding people who have access to your team, managing permissions, much easier in Teams than in SharePoint. So Teams, while both Teams and SharePoint allow for collaboration with groups, Teams should be your primary platform unless it's particularly complex. And when it's particularly complex, then SharePoint is a good solution. An example of that might be that you've set up a portal, you're inviting in 3 different business partners into it, you only want some of them to see part of it, and that's where SharePoint comes into play. Teams is simple. It is just, you got an owner, you have members, and you have guests from the outside world, and they all have the same privilege pretty much, with some exceptions, but pretty much the same. So it's very straightforward and simple. And then finally, OneDrive is where you manage your professional private content. I manage things like my personal task lists in there, like professional photos and stuff like that, stuff I'm never going to share with anybody else. but I want to keep it in my professional private area. And as I mentioned a moment ago, in reality, all those documents are really stored in SharePoint. These are just interfaces on top of it. Okay. Another issue that people have is a question about where their file system has gone. So people are used to, a lot of organizations are used to a file server where you've got to log in through a VPN to get into your corporate network, and then you've got a Z drive or a P drive or something like that, and that's where most of your files for the organization are stored. That's your traditional file system. A lot of Microsoft 365's competitors in the document collaboration space, like Google, Box, Ignite, Dropbox, they also tend to be not a lot more than just a file system in the cloud. So when you're in any of those, like Google Drive, you'll see a file system with a bunch of files, just like a lot like your traditional file system. This, on the other hand, is what Teams looks like. Teams is quite different. Now, here's my files, but it's files for just one of my teams. So this is just our internal team for governance policies. And so I see my files there, but where's the rest of my files? Now, you can click through to other teams and go to the Files tab, and you'll see them. But that's a little different than just this collection of folders and files across your entire, all of your organization. So what we like to do is we like to synchronize those down to your desktop using the OneDrive sync client. And you can see on the left-hand side here, you'll see distributed logic with a building icon here. And underneath here, these are all teams that I synchronize down to my PC. And so what this does is it brings the whole file system orientation right back in. So despite the fact that we've got all these teams and the files take a few clicks to get to, you can bring it all back into a master file system, just like you had in the old days. You can, and regardless of what avenue you use to collaborate, whether it's from the file system, I tend to do a lot from the file system. So I tend to just jump in here, and if I want to work in a presentation, I'll just double click on it and start working on it. It's automatically saved straight back to SharePoint. If someone else is collaborating on that document with me, say from Teams, and then someone else is doing it from a browser, and someone's doing it from their mobile phone, we're all still working off the same copy of the file, no matter how we get to it. So it's really which user interface you use for doing document collaboration is dependent on your specific needs, and sometimes organizations just leave it up to their users which avenue they want to use. Some people, are totally invested in Teams. Other people like the file system first.
Hey, Mark, I know you mentioned that this is how they did it in the olden days, but I think there are still a lot of people living in the olden days presently. So yeah, I think that was a really good slide to show people that they can, make a migration over here, but still have something that they're somewhat comfortable with as they continue to train and learn how to use the new interfaces.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Michael. All right, so that's where your documents went. They're still there. You just have different ways of getting to them, and you can bring it all back together. Okay, there it is, all back together. Okay. Other complaint on the platform is that it's difficult to manage. I agree. It's difficult to manage if you're just using SharePoint as is out of the box without setting things up right. Okay, so specifically, here's the complaints about difficulty to manage that we hear a lot. People keep creating teams, and we've got no control over it. We have walked into multiple customers where they had more than one team per person. Okay, that's probably a bad sign. that's an awful lot of teams per person. And when there's no controls in place, that tends to happen quite quickly. Also, permissions in Teams are very easy to manage. But if you're in SharePoint, they can be difficult to manage because they can be complex. You want the complexity if you're using SharePoint. You want those features, but it can make it difficult to figure out who has access and where they have access and how to manage that. We'll show you how to get past that. Also, I don't know what SharePoints I have access to. Another complaint. It's because you can't actually see them all out of the box with SharePoint. It seems like a big hole. I agree with that, but we'll show you how to close it. And also, I just don't know who has access to my content. Hard to find. Okay, so we'll talk about all those. Okay, so what's the problem with team sprawl? So when we say team sprawl, we mean just a lot of teams popping up. It can cause quite a few problems. Oftentimes people self-create teams and then they never use them. And these extra teams cause clutter in the Teams app, so it's just another listed, another team listed in your list of teams that shouldn't be there because you're not using it. So it's clutter. It can make it, because there's that extra clutter, it can make it more difficult to find documents. Oftentimes these teams that people set up and don't use, they already existed. And the reason they're not using is they found out there was already a team there. So now you have two Duke teams. Now where should the files be? So it causes confusion. So definitely risk of duplicate documentation. And the more workspaces, the less attention you can pay to them, the less, the more the controls you put around them might be violated. So there's a bigger potential for data leakage and other security issues, particularly from forgotten workspaces. We've walked into customers, done assessments where they've had users from the outside world who were invited in 3 years ago, haven't used it, and still have access. So that's a problem that's oftentimes caused by that kind of sprawl. All right. So the solution we like to see is to remove the self-service creation of Teams and SharePoint workspaces, and instead provide people with a form and then bolt an approval process onto it. So when someone wants a new, say a team, they request the team, some central person, an admin should say, hey, that team's already there, reject the request, go look at this team, etc. So you want a little stage gate there. Okay, and the solution, you can't do that out of the box. So you can't offer them a form out of the box. We have a variety of solutions, but one of our favorite, I'm going to show to you quickly. And that's a third-party tool that's very cost-effective. That's called Provision Point, okay? And we'll show you really quickly what that does. So remember, the pain point here is it's hard to control and maintain my platform. So let's see what this tool does to that. Okay, so here is Provision Point. And neat thing about Provision Point, one thing is it has a directory. And remember a moment ago, I said there's no good place in Microsoft 365 to find all the teams you have access to. That's true. What Provision Point does is it brings together all of the workspaces that the organization has access to. People can come in here and request access to from the owners. Owners can automatically approve access. You've got, like right here, this is a team workspace, and then this one's SharePoint. So not only can we see every SharePoint site that we have access to, but we also can see every team all together in one place. Okay, which is nice. You can see the sites that you manage. So if you're the owner of certain workspaces, you have additional privileges, and you have a view that filters down to only what you own. Okay, but most importantly, we'd like to take away people's ability to create teams on their own and SharePoint sites on their own. So we've got to replace it with a way to request these. And that's part of what this tool does. And so we actually internally, this is our internal Provision Point. We have 4 different offerings to our employees, and that includes a mix of kind of different types of teams and SharePoint sites. We have, for example, a team, we call it Teams Holistic Project Collaboration. And when people request these and it gets approved, it automatically builds out a specific template with a team that's configured just the way they want it. Same goes for these others. So I'll just take a quick look here. And this is what a user would see when they go to request a new workspace. They give it a name. They can set the ownership. They can set members. This offering does not allow sharing with the entire company, and it also doesn't allow sharing with guests. Okay, so when we create these service definitions available to everybody, you can package in different policies and features. So we just enter this in. We click on requests, And then we'll be able to, as an admin, will see that request appear in their queue, and they can auto approve it. Another nice thing in controlling your platform, bear with me while it loads, okay, is that this tool also keeps complete track of the important things you need to know to manage your team. You can actually manage your team completely here. So it shows who the owners are, which is important. You can always email somebody, hey, I'd like access to the site, or what's the site about? There's also a really cool timeline. And this timeline is a timeline of events about your workspace. And it's stuff like adding owners and removing owners. We also ask people every 6 months to review their site and let us know whether they want to keep it or not. And all those events are all listed in the timeline here. So we went from not having a lot of control over the platform, all of a sudden have a real great control over it. And lastly, you're able to take a variety of actions like managing membership in this tool. Okay, so that should give you a little bit of flavor here for how we can regain, control and stop team sprawl. We just went through, for example, a process with one of our customers where they had about 30 teams coming who reached their 6-month limit, and everyone had to say, I either want to keep it or I don't. And we were very pleasantly surprised to see about 8 of them were archived out of that collection. And that means your team sprawl is being managed automatically without any IT intervention. Okay. Right. Another thing so another complaint is that, you're in SharePoint and permissions are really hard to figure out. You have to kind of hunt, like if you've got permissions at a folder level or a document level, you've got to hunt through SharePoint to figure it all out. It's not nice, and it leads to people really not understanding who they're sharing with, which is when the owners of a workspace don't know who they're sharing with, there's a real danger of security issues and data leakage. So I don't have time to go into a full demo of this, but with Provision Point, this is another tool from them, and this is called Provision Point Permissions. And this will actually show you in an easy to read format all of your permissions, whether they're on a document or they're a folder, etc., and you can manage them from right there. So it makes it super easy for anybody, even if you're in an environment where you've got, like I mentioned before, like you have 3 or 4 different business partners coming in and there's really crazy permissions. This lets you see them really easily.
That's actually a really powerful tool, Mark, if I can just pause here for a second. One of the common questions that we get, and you pose it, is who has access to my stuff? Because there are times you really want these sites to be collaborative, so you give people the ability to share files within the system. But giving people that much power, sometimes can put an organization at risk. So it's great to have this type of tool to be able to do some level of audit on whatever cadence if it's a monthly cadence or quarterly cadence, whatever it might be. So this is really, really powerful for that.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate it. Yeah, and anyone who's managed SharePoint sites before knows that everything Michael said was true. Okay. Yeah, so what sites do I have access to? So we saw a minute ago in Provision Point that it's pretty easy to see the sites that I'm involved with just by going to the directory. So Provision Point's a nice little solution. But there's some other solutions that we do with some of our customers. We do things like a customized page that allows people to search for everything they have access to. There's also built into the platform, there's a page called Delve that everybody has. And you can do things like, you can see your recently accessed sites, you can see sites that you want to follow, so it's like bookmarking. And also featured links, the organization can roll out featured sites and featured links. So let's say that HR has benefits enrollment coming up. They might want to feature the benefits enrollment site here. Okay, so it's easy for people to access. You'd surface that site in a lot of other ways too, but that's one place you could. The only problem, now I said a few minutes ago, there's no place in SharePoint to see all of your sites. These aren't necessarily all the sites you have access to. They're the ones you've chosen to favorite, right? So this one's not 100% solution, but it gets you close. And we went over Provision Point. That's a great solution, brings it all together. Okay. And then other Microsoft benefits. So we talked about, so this collection of slides was about the major pain points we hear about all the time. This next collection is not so much pain points, but it's features that people are pretty excited about. Okay. One thing is that you can build intranets in SharePoint. Okay. And this is a screenshot of that. And I'll show you one live really quick here. So this is a live, this is an internal demo site that we have, but this is a SharePoint intranet. And an intranet is, the way we define it is that an intranet is a place for a small group of individuals in your company to present content, information, resources, policies, procedures in a place where your entire organization can consume them, okay? And so we have features like, the latest and greatest news in the company featured in a big hero web part straight up the front here. You've got things like the ability to have open conversations in your organization. So kind of public conversations, a public forum, very popular with some of our customers. You can have, specific kind of call outs of news or how-to pages, helpful links and upcoming company events and new hire carousels and CEO blogs and videos, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, your Twitter feeds and kind of anything you can imagine, not even touching the surface. That's one feature people love. Okay, next up is the Power Platform. This is we're seeing more and more demand for the Power Platform. It's a real growing part of our business, and in the marketplace, it's been adopted wildly. It's made up of 3 tools. One's called Power BI, which is a business intelligence tool. It's great for graphing and deep analytics. It's upper right-hand quadrant Gartner, even compared with industry leaders like Tableau. It's right up there. Power Automate is the workflow engine, and then Power Apps is how you build forms. Together, you can create pretty much any kind of an application you want. And it's the application's built not in traditional code, but in what people call low code, which means that it's easier and people are more effective using it without really difficult coding. Okay, there's a lot of visual design surface to it for the developers. This is an example of a new hire request application that we built. And Powerapps is the actual technology here, and then beneath it for sending out notifications and changing statuses, et cetera, you've got the workflow, and we can always run Power BI against it to visualize the data. And I'm going to show you a quick demo here. Okay, so this is right here in this part of this this is a SharePoint page, and this is a Powerapps sitting in the middle of the page. Powerapps can stand alone. They can be on your mobile phone in the Powerapps app. They can be in SharePoint pages, and they can be in Teams. So you build it once, and you can put it anywhere you want, and it'll work everywhere. It's really made to suit all form factors, all different types of devices. So this is a health COVID at-home screener. This is an actual application without any real data that several of our customers use. And it's very simple. It is an app that most people use off their phone that allows people to answer a few questions related to COVID to determine whether they're allowed to come on premises on a given day. Okay. As an end user, as an administrator, I have a special view. Okay, and this is going to tell me all the passes and fails of employees. Okay, so that's good. We've got some passes here, but this guy, Mark Parsons, he's not coming in today. Okay. And you can search for people, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so let's say that I want to take the test. Pretty simple. Have I been sick or shown symptoms recently? No. I haven't been in close contact with anybody. Have have you taken public transportation? No. And has my temperature been greater than 37.5 Celsius? Okay, yeah, I know who that, there should be Fahrenheit, but that's all right. So no. And I'm going to answer this in Fahrenheit because I don't know what it would be in Celsius. So I think I'm going to fail. Yeah, I guess 98.6 in Celsius is too high. So anyway, that's a quick screen. So I mentioned that we can put it anywhere we want. So I'm actually going to toss it into Teams, that whole app right now. So I'm going to bring up Teams, and I'm going to jump in. Okay, and I'll go to our center of excellence, where all things learning is located. And I'm going to add that app in here. As soon as it loads, there we go. I'm busy trying to sync my documents here. So bear with me just a moment. There we go. Just take a moment here.
I love live demo.
There we go. Ooh, pokey. All right. So there's Powerapps. Now in Teams, you can add thousands and thousands of apps, probably everything you ever heard of. But we want to put that Powerapp in here. And what this is going to do is show me every Powerapp that we built and is available in our Microsoft 365 platform. Okay, and COVID Screener is right there. Okay, and now we have the same app in Teams. Okay, and as I mentioned, you can also have the app on your phone. It's actually a really good experience. And if you have multiple apps, the phone actually will give you an inventory of your apps, so you can use any of them. So it's really nice. So this just shows you how you can take how tightly integrated the whole Power Platform is in SharePoint and Teams, etc. Okay. Okay, this is just a couple slides you can leave in the back pocket here. This is just showing that, according to Gartner, the Power Platform is in the top right-hand side for leaders in the industry for these types of development platforms. And here's Forrester. All right. So with that said, I'd like to turn it over to for folks for any questions.
Okay, Mark, great. Very informative discussion. Let's everybody, we've got a couple questions queued up, and we'll tackle those first. Everybody else, questions for Mark or Michael, please enter them in the Q&A feature. So talk to us a little bit about, Marcel has a couple questions around the cost for Provision Point. It sounds like you made an impact there with the discussion around Provision Point. So how does it licensed? What does it cost? Let's start there.
Yeah, if you're 100 employees or less, Provision Point is $1,000 a year. That's Provision Point for workspaces. If you include the permissions component, it's $1,500. If you only get the permissions component, it's $500. Then if you're 100 to 250 people, it's $2,500. And then above that, it's basically pay per user.
Okay, that was fairly easy to understand. And then I guess there's just a couple more questions around Provision Point and how it works. But Marcel had kind of a follow-on question related to Provision Point, but I guess it kind of, the question, his basic question was, for example, sometimes you don't want employees to see all the existing teams and sites. For example, top secret new product thing, is it possible to control who sees what? Talk to us a little bit about that generally.
Yeah, you've got in Provision Point, there's a don't show in directory feature. Yeah, for exactly that reason.
And where is that configured? So is that something a senior administrator, the super administrator in Provision Point can hide certain content, or is that in SharePoint?
Any of the above. So we can do it actually. Let's see. This one might be a good one. I'll try that. I think I have it right here. Even. No, I don't, unfortunately. Yeah, so we can enable the ability to remove it from the directory. First of all, admins can always do it, but owners of a team can do it if we give them that privilege. So we would basically say remove from directory would be an action we'd light up for the owners of a workspace. So if they wanted to get it out of there, they could get it out of there.
All right. So
also you can wrap any request like that in an approval process if you want. So it can go to IT and IT could approve it.
Right. So I think one of the great things I think you showed today is there's all these capabilities to help users and administrators and owners and leaders get better visibility to all the content you have. And once you have visibility, you can control it better. But one of parts of control is there's certain things you want to obscure. If there are top secret projects or mergers and acquisitions, things underway, there are things you don't want everybody to see, or even mid-level people to see, for instance. Mm-hmm. So that's a whole part of data governance as well. Let's dive into a couple other questions. Talk to us. So Andrew asks, does everyone on a team need to have Microsoft 365 installed? Are there restrictions due to firewall policies, people on different networks? So kind of talk to us about guests and external collaboration and the Microsoft 365 platform.
All right, great. Yeah, great questions. So guest users, you can invite in pretty much like you do with any other platform. You basically just enter in their email address, and let me back up a second. First of all, in order to invite guests in, you need to allow sharing with external users on whatever the workspace is, whether it's a team or SharePoint site. When you build the team, when people make their requests for the team or the SharePoint site, they check off whether or not they want to have it be shareable to guests. So once it is shareable, then they can go ahead and invite people in. Now you can put what we call domain whitelisting in that says you're only allowed to share with these domains. Okay, you can do that. You can do it either at the whole company level, corporate level, or at the workspace level. Either way you want to do it. But once you have that domain in place and your workspace allows external sharing, you can then invite those guests in from the outside world. Most of the time, those people will already have Microsoft 365 corporate accounts, in which case they just use that account to access what they've been invited to. If they only have personal accounts, then they use that personal account. They basically sign up when they're invited. They go through a little registration, and then they're onto the platform. And you can turn multi-factor authentication on, so they're well managed. Was there anything specific about guests there, Ted? Because it's a real wide topic.
Yeah, I mean, I think you addressed it. I mean, I think you addressed one of the prime considerations, which is guests do not need to be licensed users.
Yeah, right.
But they do need some sort of credential that is a Microsoft account. So either a corporate Microsoft 365 account or how shall we say, maybe like an Outlook account, I guess, right? I mean, they need some Microsoft service account to become a participant in the external collaboration exercise.
That's true, yeah. So basically, if you've got, say, a Gmail account and you don't have a corporate account, then that's exactly right. What happens is when you're invited, a wizard comes up, and what it does is it actually creates a Microsoft Live account, which is what underpins a lot of Microsoft services outside of Microsoft 365. And it's very straightforward. They register for that. Once they're registered for that, then they're in. Yeah, and there's absolutely no licensing for guests, no costs at all for SharePoint teams, etc. And you can not only, in Teams, you can not only collaborate in documents with people, but you can chat with people, fully featured Teams capabilities.
Okay, well, great. And I think Michelle had a follow, I mean, I think a very closely related question. I'll just read the question, but I think we just covered it. But Michelle asked, can you talk about adding external guest users to SharePoint or Teams who don't use Microsoft 365? I work with a lot of G Suite users who have struggled in this area with document sharing and collaboration. So any extra color on the collaboration with corporate G Suite users? I mean, I think we just addressed it, but maybe make another comment there.
Well, yeah, so right. Part of that question was also, what do I need to install? Do I need to install Microsoft 365? Actually, you can have partners who have no installation of Microsoft 365. They don't have any Microsoft Word. They don't have Excel. They don't have PowerPoint. They don't have Outlook. They don't have access to a Microsoft 365 tenancy, and they can't install anything on their computer. Not a problem at all. They just have a complete browser experience. So you send them out a guest invitation link, and they get the link, they click on it, and they either have to register or they get them straight in because they already have an account. And that's all there is to it. They can start using Word in the Word browser. So in any browser, or Excel in any browser. They can interact with Teams completely in a browser. You'll actually, the browser experience in Teams is so close to the desktop, you won't even know you're in it. You won't know which one you're in. So if people are interacting with you with Teams as guests, they don't need a license, but they have the full experience with no installations, no requirements in any way, shape, or form.
Okay, and I think I'm going to throw this question in that just occurred to me. I think a lot of what you're sharing, Mark, it's kind of like a metaphors and principles of kind of collaboration. And the challenge I think we often have is that users, just the typical user inside of an organization, doesn't understand these kind of maybe fundamental principles with how either the system's set up, and you run into these problems because kind of like the underlying principles, no one's explained them. Like, this is how we collaborate externally. So talk to us a little bit about what you do with Teams training or Microsoft platform training.
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's really two ways that you align people with how the technology works and when to use what, and that's your governance plan and its training. So, why am I talking about a governance plan right now? And we're talking about people trying to understand what they should use and how they should use it. Well, your governance plan, actually, one of the first things we do is we say, okay, so you've got teams and we sit down with stakeholders in the company and we say, okay, you've got teams in SharePoint and in OneDrive. Let's talk about how you collaborate today and what you're looking to do. And we come up with a policy. And the policy says, we're going to steer people into Teams. We're going to keep them away from SharePoint. And of course, we'll let people use OneDrive. And then you kind of come up with how you want to use it as an organization. That's the governance component. And that actually will get spelled out in detail in the governance plan. And we'll actually grab a few of the governance plan components like that and bring it into the training. So then we train people on the platform. One of the first things we do is we talk about what a team is. When should I create a team? When should I just use an existing team? When do I create a channel? When do I create new folders? And we walk people through an analogy of a house, right? And a team is a house, and then there's areas inside the team that are rooms in the house. And we walk people through that analogy. People tend to get that, and people really start to understand, okay, I create a new team when it's a new group of people I'm going to be collaborating with, or there are all those rules of thumb, and that's what we kind of walk people through that. And then in training, that all gets reinforced again and again. So,
right.
So we talk exactly about how your organization needs to use it and what the use cases are and which tool they map to.
Right. And when that training sticks, when you have employees who are collaborating externally, they can deliver crisp, consistent messaging to external collaborators on, how to get involved or how to engage, and it should be relatively seamless if it's consistent,
Yeah. Yeah, and we actually, so we offer not only basic training, but we've got a bunch of kind of sub modules that we can either bolt on or add as additional trainings. We do we do a lot of drill downs on topics like that, on managing meetings, and certainly guests is a big topic. So yeah, so we have a bunch of kind of call out trainings like that as well.
Okay, let's talk a little bit more about the Power Platform. Another question that was asked is, what are some of the business automation projects that your clients ask you to work on? So what are some of the common problems that the Power Platform is being used to solve today?
So we're building 3 onboarding applications right now. So the onboarding, we built so many onboarding apps at this point. It's funny. So a lot of onboarding apps. You saw the health screener. That's kind of a case. But then they're very specific to people's businesses. Some examples are, let's see. For a pharmaceutical client, they manage clinical studies. So there's these sites all over the world that they need to manage, and they need people out on those sites to be able to enter in data about how many people have been enrolled in the study, how the study is going from a metrics viewpoint. And so there's these people out on sites and other people in corporate collecting all this data in a form, and then that information comes into a tracker. The tracker shows all the sites, and it gives you a graphical dashboard of the status on all the different sites, and you can drill down into each. And that's implemented in a combo on the Power Platform. Let's see. I'm trying to think of. We have an awful lot of one-off stuff like that. We've even built an entire ERP system in it for a sporting goods company. So
and
yeah,
when you say onboarding, I mean just something as simple as employee onboarding. I mean that's an area where there's a ton of paperwork and red tape potentially that you can kind of turn into a smooth, streamlined process where you consistently capture everything you need and automate a lot of the different workflows that need to happen.
Yeah, that's right. And I showed a picture of that earlier, of one of those onboarding apps earlier. And in essence, what it does is it allows a new hire to flow from whatever the intake system is, their prospecting system for new hires, and it kind of starts there. And it starts with a hiring manager entering who they're hiring, who approved it, et cetera, and it flows through then to HR. And HR, will do its part, check off certain things, add them into their HR system, et cetera. And then it goes to facilities people to create a new desk area, a new pod for that person. And then it goes over to IT to install, laptops and monitors and equipment like that. And so kind of however your organization handles it. The Power App itself lets people interact with it, and they can only interact with the things they ought to based on their role. And then workflow as soon as HR is done, a notification goes out to IT to do their part. And if IT doesn't do it within 2 days, they get a notification. And then we have Power BI that shows the metrics and how long it took in each stage so they can fine tune it and that type of thing.
There's a lot of buzz in the market about robotic process automation, RPA. Is the Power Platform RPA? Just help us to get our head around that.
Yeah. So we don't have experience with it. I'll just say it's been generally available for about 5 months now. But the robotics component allows you to orchestrate any processes on your computer by basically, as a user, going through repetitive processes where it records it, and then you have a tech who's got to get a little bit involved to make sure it's kind of set up right. But then whatever that manual process was that you were doing locally, that can the Powerapps has an agent that can run on your PC and execute it on demand.
Okay, so that's just taking it to another level. So, and there's new stuff coming down the line for Microsoft to play in that space.
There's a whole other area of Powerapps too, which is great, which is geared for like portals for guests, portals for external users. It's called the Powerapps Portal, and it has all the functionality of Powerapps in terms of building apps, but it also it's really geared towards sharing with external users. So people can use their Facebook accounts and Google accounts like any authentication mechanism you've ever heard of out there. And so it makes it, there's no friction. You can have anonymous users. You can convert anonymous people into people who have to log in. It's really geared towards external facing portals. It's basically, it's what you saw earlier in the demo for Powerapps, but in a portal that people, that is incredibly easy to invite and manage external guests.
Okay, great. So let's take this kind of in a different direction. Just talk to us about people doing migrations. And one of the questions is, what are the benefits of moving my file system to Teams and SharePoint versus something like a Box or Ignite? What are some of the benefits organizations start to lock in?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so let me demonstrate. So this is these are Teams files that I happen to synchronize down to my desktop. So I can just do something like, I can share it from right here. I'm still in Windows Explorer. So I can share it with anybody in my organization or with guest users outside of the organization. I can also do things like view history. And I can manage history. Actually, I think this bottom one this one has some version history. So I have, my complete version history. I can restore older versions. I can create copies and all that. That's not what you're going to find in a traditional file system. Another reason that you move to Teams, the biggest reason you move to Teams is that you don't just want to use the file system. You want to collaborate with people in other ways. Okay. And if we use Teams to a ridiculous degree, and the reason I would want to have my files up for let's pick a good example here. Let's see, yeah. So not only can I have my files, so this is everything about how we manage governance for our customers. You'll notice that we have a lot of conversation going on here. So what's really cool is, a year from now, if I come back to this project, I know that every iota of information, whether it's conversations we had or documents or meetings, recordings of meetings, that is all in one place in my team. Now let's go back to the file system for a second. Okay, I can't communicate with anybody. I can't do any posting. I can't add any apps like my Powerapps or the thousands of others. This is just for hunting and finding files and opening them up and editing them. So Teams layers on all that. Something very subtle about Teams is, we talked about how people miss their file system, and this brings it back together. After a while, people miss the file system less and less. And that's because over time, if I want to locate information, especially information I haven't accessed recently, and somebody says to me, "Oh, yeah, remember that development project we did? What did we do about that again? Where did we leave that off?" So I can come to the file system and I can try to figure out exactly where that is, but I have to have a pretty good knowledge of the file system. Or I can just, I'm in Teams and you said, "Oh, a development project," so I click on the development team because of course everything is in here. And there's kind of different types of development. Oh, yeah, there's a Power Platform project. So yeah, now everything about that project is all in one place in here. It just took me 2 clicks to get to the content that I hadn't worked on in 2 years. What's subtle but different about this is that the Teams model basically is pushing you into a model where it's organized by your customers or projects or functions in your company. Now you may say, my file system was too, but is your file system really that clean? Is it really still organized that way, or has it grown out of control? Teams, because of the controls we put around it, like we showed earlier, Teams will always stay in alignment with the basic organizational policies of Teams. So you can get to things by going to a function in the company, a project, or a customer. So you can locate information at just a few clicks, even if you haven't seen it in a long time. And people don't need knowledge of your very complex file system in order to find their information.
Right. So I guess, you know, the boxes or ignites of the world, they don't really have that layer of context and communication that happens around files, which is really where Teams kind of brings it all together and takes collaboration to another level.
Exactly. You can't, in your file system, you can't have, we have with every one of our teams, we've got OneNote built in. So we have, an entire note-taking database that's built in. You have all kinds of apps you can add in Powerapps, et cetera. Yeah, so it's not just more modes of communication. It's also all kinds of functionality like apps and OneNote databases and that type of thing that all gets layered in.
Okay, well, great. I think we had a good number of questions here to work on, and which is great. Why don't you guys kind of talk to our audience today about how to get started if they have questions around data governance or how to take their Microsoft implementation to another level?
Yeah, so the question is, how do you get started? So with almost all of our customers, there's two things we do up front. One is an assessment of the platform, and we've got homegrown tools that basically it'll look at every bit of your tenancy, and it tells us all the information we need in order to understand what shape your platform's in, what kind of policies are in place that we know you don't really want. Like people oftentimes are sharing in ways they don't know they are. They're sharing stuff too widely. The assessment's going to catch all that stuff, and we create a findings document, and that findings is, hey, here's where you're out of alignment, and here's our recommendations for getting into alignment. And then based on that, we create a governance plan for the platform. So we assess it with our tools. It gives us a complete report of everything that's out of alignment. We discuss it with the customer, and then we build a governance plan. And the governance plan is, okay, we had these findings and issues. We talked about it, and you were very amenable to addressing these things. So we put it into the governance plan, and we say, this is how we're going to govern the platform. And once that's in place and the processes to support it are in place, your platform is now in alignment with best practices, and it's governed, meaning that this process is in place to make sure it stays in alignment with the plan. And then there's training. Those are the three common elements with every customer.
Fantastic. Great. Michael, any final comments on just for NENS customers to engage?
Yeah, you reach out to your account manager for NENS customers. For those that are not a NENS customer, you can simply email us info at nens.com. And I can circle back with some answers. If I need to get Mark involved, I know where to find him, and we can circle back and answer the questions for you. That's it. That's closing. I know we're right at time.